Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Nature of Predators. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 171. Memory transcription subject, Onzo, Yodel Technical Specialist. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 25th, 2137. After the human troops leapt from our ship towards the lunar surface, survival up in the stars proved to be a harrowing task. There were several factors that left our warship in a precarious spot. On a grander scale, the gap we'd cleared with 3 rounds of antimatter bombs had sealed. The UN drones had borrowed seconds for us against hopeless numbers, falling by the thousands. Half of our allies were situated on the other side of the Shadow Fleet, but were unable to help us retreat due to their own problems. Turning back wasn't an option, and that door closed. It was a matter of avoiding immediate death. The nuclear weapons tucked away upon the moon were launched as soon as we got past the fleet, leaving us quite the radioactive payload to evade. Drones scrambled to cut them down, despite having Kolshians spitting plasma at their heels. While our drones on this side of the globe had suffered heavy casualties, manned ships hadn't gone unscathed either. Our vessels had taken a beating, with several direct hits to our underbelly, and we lacked any shields once those were taken down. Honestly, if someone didn't engineer a way to facilitate shield current despite magneto-resistance, they would be all useless in the future battles. The United Nations hadn't scrounged up any alternative innovations on that front yet. While I had my eyes on any missile launches, we couldn't afford to take many more hits from conventional weapons as well. Our craft was hanging together by a thread, with a single love tap able to cause structural integrity to unravel. Even if Sovlin, Carlos, and Samantha are able to gain control of the ground stations, that'll take time. I'm not sure how we're supposed to hold out against nukes, free shots from planetary defense lasers, and Shadow Fleet ships. The Terran fighters were mere nuisances to the drones, and were getting their asses handed to them. Though it was difficult to discern through the sea of sensor blips, the Dirtian Shield and Sapien Coalition seemed to be struggling against the Dominion assault. The Arxel had brought tons of spacecraft into the fray, while the Avian Alliance was showing novel aggression. The Greys were the seasoned veterans in that department. The Carnivals hadn't been expecting such a fight from the homogeneity, but they adapted their strategies swiftly. Concurrently, on the far side of Uffa, Chief Hunters Ilthus and Usla fleet had been reduced to stray remnants. The UN drones and the technocracy craft there were left outnumbered, on their own, and unable to join our engagement by the moon. "This is not how we wanted the battle to go. Particle beams alone won't win this fight," I hissed. Tyler scratched his blonde scalp. "Let's hope taking the planetary defenses is enough. We don't have many tricks left in the bag. Lest you got a big something in mind, Onzo." "My suggestion is to get somewhere those lasers can't have free rein to shoot us, except that we can't go back the way we came, and we've suffered enormous losses. The way I see it, we just need more ships. The Shield and Ilthus just don't cut it." "This goes to show why we ain't provoked the Dominion. We didn't want to fight them and the Shadow Fleet at the same time. As for betterment to know how much we had their number, guess that ship has sailed, huh?" "I think if things get much worse, the Dirtian will follow through on their promise to bomb Alpha. Since we're on the brink of defeat, maybe you should tell them to." My friend's straw muscles tightened. "I don't want to authorize that." "I know, neither do I. After seeing how senseless the glassing of Kauta was, but even if we flip the planetary defenses, it'll be too late to bring back our losses. We might have lost 50,000 ships across all our allies, which is a large chunk of our fleet. Enemy casualties are maybe 20,000 so far, and that's almost solely from particle weapons, which most of our fleet doesn't have. I don't see a scenario where we can win here." The census officer's scowl deepened, displeased with my suggestions. His blue eyes seemed to be counting the minutes that had passed since Sovlin and his team leapt into space. They could be barging into the complexes by now, given how close their landing sites were. It was a miracle we'd managed to keep out of range and alive that long. What would happen to the troops if we fell, and they were left stranded on the moon with limited oxygen? What would come of humanity and Yodel if our all-out attack came up short? I supposed before drastic scorched earth action would be authorized, we should see if the planetary defenses could be impactful enough. A laser from the moon was identified as aiming at us, leaving us mere seconds to swerve off its vector. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as my brain came up empty for any last-ditch strategies. We would have won this battle, if it was just the Colchians. We'd done admirably to make it this far, with the Dominion joining in. But now, I could see 2 Shadow Fleet vessels tearing after us, lining us up for when their plasma weapons recharged. I desperately passed along the nearest drone's coordinates to weapons, but thanks to the foe's dramatic twirl, our shot didn't cripple it like I'd hoped. It merely made a dent in its armor, so meaningless that the hostiles didn't slow in its pursuit. There had been a momentary pause in the planetary defense firing, but I could see the entire complex lighting up for us now. It was a shame that we were out of bombing range and that we'd committed to foot soldiers taking the installation regardless. I fumbled with sensor readouts, searching to map the laser's path. How were we meant to dodge 2 plasma beams that would tear off any second, and a laser? We still had physical barrier to deploy to impede one incoming munition, but we couldn't shield both sides. I made a split-second decision and relayed the suggestion to drop it in front of the Shadow Fleet. While the lasers were stronger, the chances of evading synchronized plasma arcs were slim without some fortress. Captain Monahan's weary eyes turned to the bridge crew. "We've received word from our unit leaders on the ground. All planetary defenses are under our control, except for a single module that was able to initiate self-destruct." I could see an explosion near the shadow border of the moon, where sunlight wasn't illuminating its cratered surface. The sensor readout had switched the defense complexes to friendly indicators. After that new information was fed into the database, I tilted my head in confusion, wondering why the nearest lasers were powering up and pointing at us. My befuddlement turned into a laugh, perhaps a sign that I was delirious from the stress of battle. We might not be on the track to win the battle, but it was amusing that the Shadow Fleet had no idea what was coming. A bluish flash radiated from the powerful weapons, and I tracked its lightning-quick path across the viewport. The complex's computer had charted the optimal angle to sizzle through both Colchian drones, splicing them clean in half before the algorithms realized what had changed. Planetary defenses revved to life on our side, finally granting us breathing room to our battered fleet. Without having to worry about flying straight into a stream of hostile lasers, I relayed a suggested course to sensors. It would take us close to the lunar surface as possible. Further, that locale was in the blind spot of the complexes, so we didn't have to worry about friendly fire. It would also aid us in getting the shuttles, evacuating our soldiers back onto the ship. As insensitive as Sovereign could be, it felt weird standing on the bridge without his jabs. With our former pursuer dead in the water, our warship beelined towards the moon with a new lease on life. I highlighted the marker of the UN shuttle assigned to our vessel, seeing that it was circling over the evac point. The soldiers would need a few minutes to travel by foot to the pickup site. To my knowledge, the rovers had been left behind and jury-rigged with explosives in case any Colchians thought to retake the facilities. Sovereign, Samantha, and Carlos wouldn't return for a little while longer. I tried to focus on picking out long-range targets, knowing that we needed to tilt casualties in our favor. The lasers had struck down thousands of enemies in a brief span that we had them online, but the Colchians were mobilizing a bombing rout. We had to push the Shadow Fleet back, despite how ill-equipped we were. It would be nice if we could rally the technocracy and UN vessels from the other side of the globe, but they were in hot water. The Shadow Fleet was pelting them with missiles and plasma, and if the hostiles burned through their munition stores, they would ram themselves into Terran ships. We couldn't replicate that crash-and-burn strategy, given that we were outnumbered. Back on our side, it would be a sacrificial play, summoning the Dirtian Shield and the Sapien Coalition to hound the Colchians from behind. Still, even though the Dominion had them on their heels, I thought that we had to bring them to us. If the planetary defenses are bombed out, with hardly a chance to rack up casualties, it's over. We got mowed down just like flies taking the complex, so we need an equalizer. I pinned my ears back against my head. Tyler, sir, have comms reach out to the Dirtian. I know they won't like orders from us, but persuade them to abandon their position against the Oxor. We need something to hound the Shadow Fleet from behind. The shield will be massacred, and the Dominion will come at us too, Officer Katana ejected. I know, but it'll keep them at bay for a few extra minutes. We've invested too much in the planetary defenses. The UN drones took too many losses on our side to get us to the drop point, and we can't handle the Shadow Fleet alone. The lasers are all we have. It's a simple calculation of what the greatest asset is. Back! We can't have gone through all of this to lose the lasers, and the shields are gonna fall one-on-one with the Oxor anyway. I'll have Monahan pass along the message. She'll tell them the truth. That's the only way, and hope they go for it. If you remind them that this is all to stop the Shadow Fleet from marching on to Kalqua, I believe the Dirtian will make that sacrifice. They want to bring the Kolshians down, at all costs." My human friend shuffled off, and I snuck a glimpse at the shuttle sensor's dot near the lunar surface. It was lifting off with our crewmates in tow, assuming all had gone well. Sovlin was a brave Gojid. To pull that death-defying stunt alongside the primates, I couldn't wait to hear some versions of how the primitive like me wouldn't have been able to handle the jetpack, ignoring the fact that I used them during maintenance spacewalks. Regardless of our fleet's dire straits in the battle for the galaxy, some things never change. If there wasn't some kind of comment about my intellectual capacity, I would be concerned. My attention returned to the present circumstances on the bridge, where Monaghan huddled over her comms. I didn't envy that conversation, but whatever she was saying seemed to be working. The Shield was trying to sidestep the Oxal vessels, who'd moved in for an up-close and personal kill. The Sapient Coalition was running interference. As the weakest links, their prey crew still proved selfless, standing in a way of blistering guns. Our plasma weapons could land a few long-range shots, but between drone evasion capabilities and distance, our accuracy was lacking. Watching our side's desperate actions now, I wished I hadn't got my hopes up back when early reinforcements entered the systems. "Hey, don't go doom and gloom on me," Tyler tapped his palm against the workstation for my attention. "Your spirits look in the toilets, my man, and I won't be having that at my station. Give me one piece of good news, Onzo." We're not dead yet?" My tail drooped further between my legs as I struggled to find a bright side. Reading the shuttle's passenger data, which showed 3 KIAs listed amongst the dozens of soldiers returning to our ship, meant that I couldn't attest to our friend's safety. "Oh, I got one positive. Sovlin, Sam, and Carlos are heading back on the shuttle now, assuming they're alive. We'll see them soon." "That's fantastic. You know, I was worried about sending that Gojid out on something extreme like that. He's really come a long way since we first met him, and I'm glad that we got a chance to make everything right between us." "By making things right, you mean that you punched him in the face?" "Well, I was angry. You gotta know what that's like, Onzo. My knuckles may have grazed his jaw, but it all worked out. This fight will work out too. So keep your head in the game. I need you to keep watch for the Dominion ships, in case they turn on us. We gotta fight to our last and be ready if the whole Tiam fleet comes at us." "Yes, sir. I'll have the Oxal's vectors mapped pronto. It might help to forward any assessments to the SC and the Shield." Tyler gave me a hearty clap on the back as I tried not to watch the Shield and Coalition bleed numbers. The Dirtian were hurling munitions towards the Shadow Fleet with fury, forcing some to turn their attention away from the encampment by the moon. The Oxal hadn't relented for a moment, and I could see their ships burning full thrusters ahead in our direction. However, in between my last visual and present one, it seemed like something had discombobulated them. Their movements looked uncertain and disoriented, like they'd been thrown out of subspace by a disruptive pulse. My inquisitiveness prompted me to solve the puzzle, seeking out what had caused the sudden hesitation. The majority of the Dominion ships seemed to reach a decision, forging ahead with shaky focus. However, before my watching eyes, an inexplicable breakdown occurred. Some Oxal vessels began firing on their own remnants. Others, agitated huntercraft, turned their sights away from the Dirtian and peppered the Shadow Fleet from behind. A handful were shooting at both the Shield and Coalition and their own side, blurring their allegiance even further. Any semblance of cohesion broke down with the infighting, as no party had a clue where to turn their guns. The Kolshians were taken off guard by the Grey's betrayal, and after a moment of consideration, began shooting all Oxal vessels with blanket condemnation. "Sir, the Oxal and the Kolshians started shooting at each other. Why? I have no clue. Ilthus said that he couldn't get through the comms embargo," I explained. "What can I say is the same chaos is unfolding on the planet's flip side. Our drones seem to be having a resurgency in efficacy." Tyler's frosty eyes widens. "This changes everything. We have to seize this opportunity while they're reeling." "How do you say it? Damn straight. We need to kick their ass before Sovlin shows up, so that he can know that we did it all without him." "I don't know about that. There's still hundreds of thousands of ships to clear out. Even if a shit ton of the ones here were Dominion, how many are on our side? We could have numbers in our favor now." "It's not so simple, sir. But the Kolshians are treating the Oxal all as hostiles, so I venture that the ones who hadn't turned on their mission will now. My opinion is that we should target the Shadow Fleet with everything that we have." "Damn straight. Whatever we have left, we'll have it flying at them ASAP." True to my conjecture, the Colchians targeting all of the Arxor vessels resulted in Batterman's entire fleet rounding on them. As the eye-popping number of ships on both sides traded blows, it was clear that the Shadow Fleet was annihilating the Dominion. While the Greys landed thousands of kills through ship volume, their ranks were being ravaged much quicker. The Dirtian Shield rallied amongst the confusion, eagerly shoving antimatter bombs meant for Alpha down the Shadow Fleet's throat. Any nanodrones and cluster bombs the UN had left assailed the enemy, capitalizing on the confusion. Planetary defenses had never been contested, thanks to the diversion, and were still cranking out ship-ending lasers without refrain. I eagerly passed along a target for our plasma railgun and noted that the indicator denoting Sovereign's transport had crossed into our ship. With the Gojid likely on his way to the bridge, I spared a glance back towards the other side of the globe. There wouldn't be any gaps in my knowledge for him to question. The Yotel technocracy was being aggressive in hounding the Shadow Fleet. But the Arxor, to distract our foes, particle beams were surgically dissecting them. The Colchians on that side were floundering enough that the UN could finally divert some drones to help our weaker flank here. We were on the cusp of winning the Far Half's engagement altogether, which should tilt the lunar fray heavily in our favor. My mind was reading after, out of nowhere, it seemed that we could end the Federation within the hour. What had changed inside the Arxor fleet, enough to sow that much division? Had humanity found a way through the cybersecurity, or was something else going on? Dominion vessels were falling in with Ilthus and Uslif remnants on the far side, though on the south their numbers were rapidly sinking towards zero. We needed to keep the pressure up, while the Shadow Fleet's focus was still on the Arxor. The Colchians had lost not just their ally, but tens of thousands of their own vessels to the betrayal. Even with our losses earlier, we have the advantage after this change. We have particle beams and planetary defenses still in play to aid our reinvigorated fleet. I watched with bated breath as I wondered if this sudden infusion of chaos would be a deciding factor in the Battle of Alpha. Victory was within humanity's grasp, and now it was up to us not to let this opportunity slip away. End of chapter. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.